The Galactic Coalition had been fighting the Empire for 17 years. Across thousands of star systems, blood had been spilled on countless worlds. The Coalition brought together 43 different species, each contributing their unique abilities to the war effort. They provided their superior technology. They brought their massive warships. They offered their strategic minds. And the humans, who had only joined the Coalition 5 years ago, brought something that nobody quite understood yet. Lieutenant Commander of the Medical Corps had served alongside humans for 3 years. He thought he understood them reasonably well. They were warm-blooded mammals with relatively fragile bodies compared to most Coalition species. Their bones broke easily. Their skin tore without much resistance. They lacked the natural armor of the, or the regenerative abilities of the. On paper, humans seemed like one of the weakest species in the entire Coalition, but had learned that paper meant nothing when it came to humans. The battle for Seven began on a cold morning. The planet was strategically vital because of its position near three major hyperspace routes. Whoever controlled Seven controlled the movement of supplies across an entire sector. They knew this. The Coalition knew this, and so both sides had committed massive forces to the fight. Sergeant Cole was 34 years old. He had grown up on Earth in a small town called. Before the war, he had worked as a carpenter. He had joined the military when they attacked a human colony world and killed 60,000 civilians. That was 4 years ago. Since then had fought on 11 different worlds. He had been wounded 3 times. He had watched friends die. He had killed more enemies than he could count. The war had changed him, but it had not broken him. His squad was assigned to hold a communications relay station on the eastern ridge of the valley. The station was critical for coordinating Coalition forces across the entire continent. If it fell, the battle plan would collapse. Understood the importance of his mission. His squad of 12 soldiers, a mix of humans, and had fortified their position and waited for the enemy to come. They attacked at dawn. They came in waves, their crimson armor gleaming in the weak sunlight. The first wave was repelled easily. The second wave pushed harder but still failed to breach the defenses. By the third wave, knew that something was wrong. They were throwing too many soldiers at their position. This was not a normal assault. This was a sacrifice play. The explosion came from below. They had tunneled under their position and planted charges. The ground erupted in fire and debris, was thrown 15 meters through the air. When he landed, he felt something break inside his chest. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but pain was something had learned to push aside. He tried to stand and realized that his left leg was gone below the knee. The explosion had taken it clean off. Blood was pumping from the wound in rhythmic spurts. He also noticed that a piece of metal shrapnel, roughly the size of his hand, was embedded in his lower abdomen. Every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. 2 of his ribs were definitely broken, possibly more. A medic would have assessed these injuries and declared him combat ineffective. Standard Coalition protocol required immediate evacuation for any soldier with more than 40% combat capability reduction. By any reasonable measure, Cole should have been lying down and waiting for medical transport. Instead, he reached for his rifle. Witnessed what happened next from his position at the medical station, 300 meters behind the front line. He had been treating a wounded officer when the explosion occurred. Through his optical enhancement gear, he watched Cole drag himself toward a defensive position using only his arms and his remaining leg. The human left a trail of blood behind him that stretched like a red ribbon across the broken ground. They were already advancing through the breach created by the explosion. Half of squad was dead or incapacitated. The survivors were scattered and disoriented. The communications relay was about to fall, and one human soldier with half a leg and a piece of metal in his gut decided that this was not acceptable. Reached a fallen support beam and propped himself against it. His hands were shaking from blood loss, but he forced them to steady as he raised his rifle. The first soldier that came through the smoke never saw the shot that killed him. Neither did the second, or the third. Fired with mechanical precision, each shot finding its target despite the trembling of his body and the darkness creeping at the edges of his vision. A plasma bolt struck him in the shoulder. The impact spun him around and dropped him to the ground. The pain was extraordinary. His shoulder was a ruin of burned flesh and shattered bone. His right arm hung useless at his side. By every logical standard, this should have been the end. The human body has limits. It can only absorb so much damage before it simply stops functioning. Cole apparently had not received this information. He switched his rifle to his left hand. It was awkward and uncomfortable. His accuracy would suffer, but he could still pull a trigger, and that was enough. He pushed himself back up against the support beam and resumed firing. Found himself unable to look away. He had studied human physiology extensively. He knew exactly how much blood had lost. He knew that the human's internal organs were likely damaged. He knew that shock should have rendered him unconscious by now. Yet the human kept fighting. It everything understood about biology. The surviving members of Squad had regrouped by now. They saw their sergeant, broken and bleeding, holding the line alone. Something sparked in them. The soldiers, despite their natural caution, advanced alongside the humans. They, usually preferring long-range combat, charged forward with their weapons blazing. Cole's refusal to die had become a rallying point. The assault began to falter. They had expected to overwhelm a demoralized and scattered defense. Instead, they found themselves facing soldiers who seemed inspired by something they could not understand. The sight of still firing from his position despite wounds that should have killed him 3 times over unsettled even the battle-hardened warriors. A commander ordered a concentrated strike on his position. 12 soldiers focused their fire on the wounded human. A plasma bolt struck his remaining leg. Another hit his chest, stopped only partially by his armor. A third grazed his head, leaving a burning furrow across his scalp. Cole went down. For 5 seconds, he did not move. The commander began to order his troops forward, confident that the troublesome human was finally dead. Then moved again. He could not stand anymore. Both legs were destroyed. One arm was useless. He was bleeding from so many wounds that the ground beneath him had become a pool of red. His vision was fading. His heartbeat was irregular and weak. But somewhere deep inside him, in a place that science could not measure and medicine could not explain, something refused to surrender. He pulled a grenade from his belt. He armed it, and he threw it with his remaining functional arm right into the center of the advancing formation. The explosion killed 8 enemy soldiers. The survivors hesitated. That hesitation was all the coalition forces needed. The counterattack hit the line like a hammer. Within minutes, the assault was broken. The communications relay was secured. The battle for 7 would continue, but this particular engagement was over. Reached 17 minutes after the fighting stopped. The human was still alive, which was medically impossible. His blood pressure was so low that his heart should have stopped. His body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. Multiple organ failure was imminent. Yet when knelt beside him, Cole opened his eyes and tried to speak. The words came out as a whisper, barely audible, leaned closer to hear. "Did we hold?" Felt something catch in his throat. "Yes, Sergeant, we held." Smiled. It was a small smile, weak and tired, but genuine. "Good, that's good." He lost consciousness then, finally surrendering to his wounds. The medical team worked frantically to stabilize him. They replaced his blood 3 times. They sealed his wounds with emergency. They pumped his body full of enough medications to keep us sedated for a week. Against all odds, against every prediction and every medical model, Cole survived the evacuation to the hospital ship in orbit. The story spread quickly. Soldiers talked about the human who refused to die. Officers included it in their reports. Intelligence analysts studied it, trying to understand what had happened. They intercepted communications about the incident and struggled to believe what they were reading. 2 months later, Cole was fitted with prosthetic legs and a cybernetic arm. The medical team told him that he would never fight again. The damage to his body was too severe. He had earned his rest. Listened politely. Then he asked when he could return to duty. Was present for that conversation. He watched the human's face as the doctors explained all the reasons why further combat service was impossible. He saw no despair in his eyes, no acceptance of limitation, only a quiet, unshakable determination. The medical commander eventually gave a desk job at a training facility on Earth. It was a compromise. Spent his days teaching new recruits the skills they would need to survive. He walked on mechanical legs and wrote reports with a cybernetic hand. But every recruit who passed through that facility heard his story. They saw his scars. They understood what was possible when a human decided that giving up was not an option. The war against the Empire lasted another 6 years. The coalition eventually won, though the cost was staggering. Historians would later analyze the conflict in great detail, examining the strategies and technologies that led to victory. But among the soldiers who actually fought, a different kind of history was passed down. Stories of courage, stories of sacrifice, stories of the human who held the line at 7 with half his body destroyed because someone had to. Retired from the military after the war ended, he wrote a medical paper about human resilience that became required reading at every coalition medical academy. In it, he tried to explain what he had witnessed. He discussed adrenaline and pain suppression. He analyzed the human nervous system and its remarkable ability to continue functioning under extreme stress. He presented data and charts and scientific observations. But in the final paragraph, he admitted the truth. Science could explain many things about humans. It could not explain Cole. Some things existed beyond measurement. Some forms of strength had no formula. The universe was vast and filled with wonders, but nothing had ever encountered was quite as remarkable as a human who simply refused to accept defeat.